That's the name of that. That's in dedication to all those people who will come running in here in about 15 minutes. Stand up and sing with us. It is fantastic. Did you all set your clocks? Did you catch that? All right, but Michael Ellie might have gotten his changed and we didn't. See what I tell you? We didn't. Well, good morning and welcome to Unity of Music City. This is a place, regardless of the transformation of time, this is a place for authentic transformation. It's who we are and it's what we do, and we're so glad that you're here with us this morning. Reverend D is in Kansas City at Unity Village this week, so you get me. So here's what happens. If during the meditation I see anybody slip out to go to the restroom and you don't come back, I will know. No, I won't know. God will know. And God will tell Reverend Denise. I've got a few quick announcements for you this morning. Let's see. I've got, which hat do I have on? This one. There's the hat I have on. First and foremost, I've got 14,000 papers up here. This Tuesday, March 13th, Becky Astorita has a Care for Empaths in her Empath Support Series, 7 to 9 p.m. All of Becky's ongoing events you can find in the bulletin, or be sure and catch Becky and talk to her about those yourself. And then, are they clearing their throat to let me know something, or? And then this Thursday, March 15th, Crystal's going to have a coloring meditation in the Namaste Cafe at 7 p.m. If you want to come and join in a little coloring meditation time, come on out and join Crystal. Thursday, March 15th. And then Saturday, the Land Lovers meeting is from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So the Land Lovers are going to be busy about the business of preparing our grounds for spring. They're going to have lunch and a meeting afterwards. If you've never been a part of the Land Lovers ministry, just come on out. I'm sure they would love to have you help weed and pull things and cut things and do whatever it is you need to do. And then just quickly, next Sunday, March 18th, Becky Astorita, of course, has Reiki and Restorative Yoga And then right after church at 1 p.m. in the Namaste Cafe is the men's emotional support group. So stay after and join that if you identify as a man. That's all I'm going to say about that. Hey, let's sing again, shall we? Stand on up. Some days I do, some days I don't. Some days I will, some days I won't. Some days I sing, some days I float. Some days I get real smart and live by his quote. For you before B does the daily word or the sacred reading. Lunch bunch this week at 11:30 on Wednesday, of course. They're still looking at The Hope, A Guide to Sacred Activism by Andrew Harvey. And then this Wednesday night, we are doing the second class of Keep a True Lent. Come on out and join us for that. It's not too late. You're not too late. We'll catch you up on whatever you missed. 7 o'clock on Wednesday evening. And then just a reminder that we are still supporting the McGavick Cluster Coalition. As a quick reminder of that, if you want to help support high schoolers to get the resources they need to graduate and go on to college, then we can do so through our church. If you choose to do so, when we do the Sacred Walk of Abundance, write a separate check. It needs to be a separate check made out to Unity with McGavick Cluster Coalition or McGavick Coalition or McGavick or whatever you choose to put there in the memo line. And then finally, I want to put this on your radar right now. We are preparing, Reverend Dee and Judy and the chaplains and a whole group of people are working on the Maundy Thursday service, which will be Thursday, March 29th, 3 days before Easter. It's going to be a really powerful experience, and I encourage you to put that on your calendar now and come on out and join us. There will be several different experiences that you can participate in: communion, foot washing, prayer and healing, and spiritual baptism. So put it on your calendar, March 29th. B?
Thank you. I let go and let God provide a microphone. Thank you, Tim. Would the other prayer chaplains please stand? The prayer chaplains are here to pray with you. Don't be shy. If you really want to seek prayer, seek one of us out. There will be someone in the prayer room after the service for prayer. Thank you. The sacred reading was created by Deb Moore. The writer and spiritual activist Parker Palmer wrote, "Every religious tradition is rooted in mysteries I don't pretend to understand, including claims about what happens after we die. But this I know for sure. As long as we're alive, choosing resurrection is always worth the risk." Perhaps the most important word in that quote is choosing. The idea that we can choose resurrection is central to the hope of awakening into our full divinity. So the affirmation is, I choose resurrection. I live awakened. The tomb is empty. I am alive. Say that with me. I choose resurrection. I live awakened. The tomb is empty. I am alive. In his book, Keep a True Lent, Charles Fillmore, the founder of Unity, wrote that the spiritual body, which is the true temple of God, is one that breathes an atmosphere and is thrilled with a life energy more real than that of the manifest man. Would you meet your God in this sacred place? Then quietly enter this Holy of Holies. You will be conscious only of the great omnipresence of God, where the light, joy, peace, and satisfaction of his Spirit abide, where truth reigns supreme. This spiritual body of which Fillmore speaks is the essence of the real you. To be aware of this essence is what it takes to live an awakened and resurrected life. Do you want to keep dreaming? Do you want to keep sleeping? Or do you want to resurrect? It is a choice each person must make. Choosing resurrection is choosing to live a life of joy, peace, invigoration, and enthusiasm. This choice is not made by rigorous and concerted efforts to modify our behavior. This choice is made by living in constant awareness of the indwelling presence of the Christ nature, our Christ nature. This divine presence, the Christ within, the Buddha within, the goddess within, doesn't matter what you call it, is the animating power of a resurrected life. And from the message, John 11:25, you don't have to wait for the end. I am, right now, resurrection and life.
So as we enter into the meditative portion of our service, I invite you, if you are willing, to get comfortable in your seat and to close your eyes and to focus on your breath. And for just a moment, to let go of everything. For just a moment, to release every thought about who you think you are, how you think you show up in the world. Just set it aside. You can pick it back up again. But for right now, set aside your identity, your name, your face, your body, your personality. You can pick them back up again. Set aside your sense of humor and the way you move your hands when you talk. And set aside the concerns that you have, the conflict that you had this week with someone close to you, or the financial concerns. Set those aside. You can pick them back up again. Set aside all of your relationships and all of the way that you identify in those relationships. Set aside being mother or father or sister or brother or child. Set aside being friend or lover. Just set them aside. You can pick them back up again. Set aside your story. Set aside your history. Set aside any memory that you have. Don't touch it. And when we set aside all of that outward expression, the way that we show up, all we are left with is the I am essence of God. That is who we truly are. This is the lap of God. And we can rest there. We can rest there with no pain, no worry, no past or present or future. Just this moment, resting in the lap of God, in the stillness and in the silence. This place of rest is always with you. It is not in you. You are in it. And you can rest there on command at any moment. All it takes is completely surrendering all we think we are. Surrender all.
Surrender all to you.
Goodness gracious. That sounds really loud to me. Is that really loud? Is that better? I tell you what, I asked Judy if we could sing that song, and now I'm really not sure why. But we got through it one way or the other. Let me make sure that I know what I'm doing here. Is it on?
Yeah.
There it is. There it is. So, when I was 8 years old, I had a best friend named Tracy Chapo. She lived right across the street from me. And Tracy Chapo and I were, we were tight. We were like this. Every sunlit hour we spent together. And the summer of '72, when I was 8, is especially notable for 2 reasons. First off, it is the year that I spent so much time in the sun. I don't know if it is for you. Is it working, Crystal?
Is it on?
I don't know. No. It's not
Oh,
on.
then it's not working.
We were off to an auspicious beginning. It was the summer that I spent so much time in the sun that my hair turned the color of a brand new copper penny. So somewhere underneath all of this, Judy's a redhead. That ought to scare you just a little bit. It's also the summer that Tracy Sciappo and I completed our choreography to Bad Bad Leroy Brown. And so, since all great artists really crave an audience, we wanted to put this show on for the neighborhood kids. We thought for sure that we could charge admission to have them come see our show. But Tracy, now she had a producer's eye, and so she knew that what we needed was a stage. We needed to have a reason why we charged admission. It needed to look like a show. Well, there were only 2 problems with this. First off, we didn't really have the money to buy the materials to build a stage. And secondly, we didn't know how to build a stage. And so then Tracy decided that that was fine, no problem. Her father would build the stage for us. Now, side note, Mr. Sciappo had never agreed to this plan, but she knew that he would build the stage for us. All we needed to do was to raise the funds. Now, we were savvy enough at the ripe old age of 8 to know that the good people of Studer Drive were probably not going to be interested in becoming executive producers of the Bad Bad Leroy Brown Review, as we were calling it. So Tracy decided that what we really needed was a charity, because people love to give to charity. And this is how it came to pass that Tracy Sciappo and I walked up and down Studer Drive collecting money for the Helen Reddy Donna Fargo Fund. and I really wish I was embellishing that story, but unfortunately, I am not. Well, we'd only gotten about 3 or 4 houses down when I saw my mother marching toward us. And at that particular moment in time, she did not appear to be a supporter of the arts. Someone had apparently called her and put a stop to our little fundraising effort. So on the same day, I saw both the beginning and the end of my sales and my dance career, right then, right there. But Tracy was interesting. Tracy was Catholic. Now, most of my friends in Saginaw, Michigan were Catholic. I still think of Catholicism as the northern religion, right? And the southern religion is, of course, self-righteousness. Yes. So all of my friends were Catholic, and I was always a little bit jealous of them because at school they could talk so openly about their religious experience because they all went to the same parish church, they had the same priest, they'd gone through catechism, confirmation, and first communion, and whatever all those things were that all my little Catholic friends went through. They went through those things together, and they could speak about them openly. Now, being a little Nazarene preacher's kid in the midst of all of this was a little difficult, right? Because when they would find out I was not Catholic, it would go something like this. So what religion are you? Nazarene. What religion are you? Nazarene. What religion? Nazarene. Is that a cult? That was invariably the question that I would get. Is that a cult, right? No, it's not. It was difficult being a little Nazarene girl in a Catholic world. But I was able to begin my budding career in observational theology by watching all of my Catholic friends. And I learned a great deal about being Catholic by watching my friends. And so one of the things that I learned from Tracy was, of course, that Catholics could dance. Which was a big old deal to this Nazarene girl because dancing was like an express ticket to hell, wasn't it, Sherry? Yeah, it was like an express ticket right to hell. So when I found out Catholics could dance, that was pretty exciting to me. And then, right next to the Sciappos lived the Dunkerleys. My dad called them the Drunkerleys. And about once a month, the Dunkerleys would have a big old party. And there'd be streets, there'd be cars lining the street. And if you looked across at the Dunkerley house, it was practically pulsing right? It was just beating. I think they might have been dancing in there, I'm not sure. But at any rate, so I learned from the Dunkerleys that Catholics could drink, right? Because Catholics, the Dunkerleys, would have this party about once a month, and the next morning they were at Mass, and it was all fine. It was no problem. And I know they were drinking because I watched Mr. Dunkerley put the mailbox back in a vertical position on several Sunday afternoons after those parties, right? So I knew that Catholics could drink and Catholics could dance. And I'm pretty sure that most of my 20s I was Catholic. I'm not sure. But I think I might have been Catholic in my 20s. There was another thing that I learned from watching my Catholic friends. I learned about the practice of Lent. Now, Lent was not something we did in the Nazarene Church. I think I had heard of it, maybe just from my friends, but we didn't do Lent in the Nazarene Church. Did y'all grow up with Lent? Anybody grow up with Lent? Okay, some people did, some people didn't. It was a high church thing. It was a Catholic thing. It was an Episcopalian thing. Nazarenes, we didn't do that in our little cult, right? So we didn't do Lent. But I learned about this by watching my friends. And what I knew early on from the very beginning was that Lent was this thing that came up periodically throughout the year. I wasn't sure when because I didn't keep a calendar when I was 8. But I knew that periodically it came up, and my friends would all talk about what they were going to give up. Right? They would talk about, most of the time it was candy. Because at 8, you haven't formed any other bad habits, I guess. But most of the time it was candy. The really enlightened friends of mine would give up like hitting their brother or something like that. But generally it was candy. And the adults that I knew, traditionally you gave up red meat for Lent. That was a big traditional thing. Some folks would give up drinking, not the Dunkerleys, of course, but some folks would give up drinking for Lent. The really ambitious ones would give up smoking. That was a tough one. Or whatever it was, French fries, whatever they would give up. It was usually food, though. It was some kind of bad habit that people gave up. And so in the early days of my observational theologian career, I saw Lent as this act of devotion through self-denial. What it was you give something up. And I associated it with the scripture where Jesus said, if anyone should come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross and follow me. And I saw Lent as this act of denying oneself. And then as I got a little bit older, I did buy a day timer at some point, and I began to place Lent on the calendar a little bit, and I realized, as you can see, these are people taking up their cross right here. And I began to place Lent on the calendar. I began to figure out where it happened, and it happened, of course, Mardi Gras was kind of marking the beginning of it, or the end of non-Lent, whatever you want to call it. This is Mardi Gras being French for get your freak on or something like that. I'm not sure what it's French for. Of course, it's French for Fat Tuesday, and so it always happens on a Tuesday night. And what these people are doing, of course, is celebrating before they have to give all this stuff up that they've decided to give up. And the next day, through some kind of hungover stupor, they make their way to the church, and they get the ashes on the forehead, and the priest blesses them and lets them know that, Lent has begun. And now has begun this time of denial. As I got even older, after I'd placed it on the calendar, I became an academician, and you know how we are. We have to look everything up and research it and figure out where it really came from. What are the goods? And so I began to research this a little bit more, and I found out where the origins of Lent as a practice began. Now, there's a man in the history of Christianity who's like the second most important man in Christianity. The first is Jesus, yeah, that's right. The first one being Jesus. So the second one is this dude named Constantine, probably the second most important man in all of Christianity. So let me just give you a 90-second history lesson here. When Jesus was born, he was born into the Roman Empire, and he was born into a world that was already well established. The Roman Empire had been around for hundreds of years. Socrates from the Greek Empire, Socrates had been around 300 years before Jesus. And when you think about 300 years, sometimes we look back in history and we don't hear that as being a really long span of time because we think in thousands of years with history. But we've got 8 years before the United States is even 250 years old. 300 years is a long time. And so Socrates had already been around for 300 years. Here comes Jesus in the middle of this vibrant, well-established, burgeoning culture, right? And then Jesus' life passes. He dies and he's crucified, resurrected, and then ascends into heaven. And 300 years later, here comes Constantine. Now, for the first 300 years of Christianity, the Christians were these isolated little pockets of people who have all kind of latched onto this ideology. But it's kind of like being Nazarene in the Catholic world, right? If the Romans ask you what religion you are, and you have enough courage to say Christian, they're probably going to ask you if that's a cult in the year 300. We're still living in a world in the year 300 that's primarily polytheistic. In the Roman Empire, you're going to go to the temple for Vesta, or Diana, or Jupiter, or Minerva, and you're going to offer your sacrifice. And that was the world that people lived in. But this Christian thing, this loose confederation of Christians, was beginning to grow, and Constantine became the first Roman emperor to convert to Christianity. And when he converted to Christianity, he looked around at this religion he's adopted, and he was kind of like, there's no there, right? There's really not a religion here. You guys just think the same thing, but there's no construct. It's kind of like unity, in a way, right? There's no real folk, there's no real construct to it. Just a loosely confederated group of believers. And so Constantine brought together all the church leaders at this town called Nicaea in a gathering we now refer to as the Nicene Council, and he said, look, you need to come up with some things that will be this religion. And so they came up with, for one thing, the date for Easter, right? The date for Easter is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the spring equinox, excuse me. Which sounds to me like a bunch of druids met in the forest, right? Smoked something, and then said, hey, let's really mess with their heads. Let's give the Christian holiday a really pagan date. So it is, and that's what Easter is. That's why it changes all the time. And they decided when Christmas was going to be. And they put it a couple days after Saturnalia because the Romans already had the time off work. And they thought that they would just kind of, grab onto the coattails there. And after a few centuries, maybe people would forget. And they would think, well, we were celebrating the birth of Jesus all along. It could happen. So they came up with these holidays, and they came up with a lot of the constructs of the church. And one of the things they came up with was this concept of Lent. That's where Lent began, at the Nicene Council. And so this was a practice because this early church had very few practices. And it was 40 days of fasting and praying. There it is, 40 days of fasting and praying. It wasn't in the scriptures. That's not where they got it. However, there were some models in the scriptures for this practice. They put the practice at the time of year when they put it. But they had a couple of really good models. I mean, if you want to model something for the Christian, Judeo-Christian faith, Moses, Elijah, and Jesus are pretty much like the big three. They're like the original Trinity or something, or the Supremes. Or maybe the Temptations. And so these three guys all fasted and prayed for 40 days, and it's all described the same way. They fasted and prayed in the wilderness, which is a whole other talk that I'll let Reverend D do at some point. But they all went out into the wilderness and they fasted and prayed for 40 days. And so the church fathers picked up on this, and they decided that they would just follow along with it. Fasting and praying is this very common practice in all the world religions. And I don't have all of them listed here at all, but all of these religions have fasting and praying as a part of their spiritual practice. Native American tribes would engage in fasting. African tribes would engage in fasting. So we see it all over the world, this practice of fasting and praying. Fasting and praying is found throughout the scriptures. Maybe not for 40 days. Moses, Elijah, and Jesus give us the 40 days, but it's found throughout the scriptures. And there's one particular instance that I want to kind of point you to for a few moments. It's found in Matthew chapter 17. So let me give you the backstory here. There's a man who has a son, and the son is said to be possessed by a demon. Now, more modern translations will say that he was epileptic. And he's heard that this teacher, Jesus, has been able to heal people, so he wants to bring his son to Jesus to be healed. But unfortunately, Jesus has already gotten quite a large following. Right? There are people all around Jesus, and the man can't quite get to him. So the man goes to Jesus' disciples and asks if they can cast out the demon. And so they tried. I'm sure Peter and Paul kind of fought over who got to do that. And then they couldn't think of the right magic word or whatever it was, and they were unable to do it. And so they went to Jesus. Jesus was able to, right away, rebuke the demon. It came out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour, instantly. And then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out? What did we do wrong?" And Jesus answered them by saying, "Because of your unbelief, for assuredly, I say to you, if you have faith as a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." Now, we love that verse. Everybody in Christendom loves this verse. Catholics love this verse. Nazarenes love this verse. Pentecostals get downright giddy over that verse right there. Unitics love this verse. It gives us warm fuzzies. All we got to have is faith like a mustard seed, and we can move a mountain. And there's a little problem there. Sometimes we don't move the mountain. And then we question, did I not have enough faith? What did I do wrong? Did I not hold my head right? Did I not meditate long enough? What didn't I do? Well, part of the problem is that we stopped reading because Jesus wasn't done speaking. However, he says, this kind does not go out except by prayer and fasting. So what Jesus was saying to the disciples was this: you haven't done your work. And if you haven't done your work, you can't cast out the demons. Right? Yes, I told you that you could do everything I can do. But I didn't tell you got to skip the desert. You still got to go to the desert. And you've got to fast and pray. So what is fasting and praying? Well, let's look at it. Fasting and praying. Praying and fasting. Historically, we've seen fasting as giving up food. But it's a lot more than that, and certainly in Unity we see it as a lot more than that. I don't know if you can read those, but I'll tell you what they are, so don't put your glasses on, it's okay. Fasting in Unity is more metaphysical because that's the way we see everything. We see it metaphysically, right? We don't have to know that Noah actually built a boat and there was a flood. What we have to know is that willingness is what saves your skin. Willingness to listen. So we look at it metaphysically, and fasting in Unity, fasting for us is about denial. It's about releasing and uncovering and casting off. It's about turning away from and letting go of who I think I am. Fasting is about saying, I am going to set this part aside because it's getting in the way. And prayer, historically, we've seen as something very much like this. My Uncle Harold was a minister in the Nazarene Church in Denver. I mentioned this in Wednesday night class, and Uncle Harold would like transform into like some kind of Amish person when he prayed, because all of a sudden it was thee and thou and all this kind of stuff. So prayer was a very formal thing for Uncle Harold. But prayer is something a little bit bigger than that, I think. Emerson said that prayer is the contemplation of the facts from the highest point of view. He also said that prayer is when, like a farmer kneels in his field and plants a seed, that he's engaged in the act of prayer. So prayer, thus, is not just a formal appeal to God. It is a focus, an intentional focus on that which is divine. It's to focus on that which is sacred, on the holy. It is to be in the center of stillness and embrace the I am of who we are. It's turning inward. It's letting go, and it's turning inward. I'm going to set this down for just a second because I want to show you something. Fasting, pushing away, letting go, releasing. Prayer, intentional focus. This is, in Buddhism, called the Abhaya Mudra. This is the mudra that the Buddha was said to enter into when he reached enlightenment. It's a mudra that carries the energy of strength and fearlessness. It's even said that he turned away a charging elephant just by doing this. Now, I'm going to ask you to do this with me for a moment. Just take your left hand and put it right here, about waist high. Right? Just let it rest there. Take your right hand and put it about shoulder height, right here. Not too high, just right there. Now for just a second, I want you to focus on the energy that you feel flowing between those two palms. And then I want you to put your right hand down. Did you feel the shift in your left hand when you put your right hand down? Yeah. Because both of these are required for the energy to move. Fasting and prayer. If you just fast, you're only going to lose weight. That's it. And if you just pray, you might start sounding a little whiny after a while, I'm not sure. But the act of both of those, what can I turn away from while I turn to the divine at the same time? That is the power of fasting and praying. Now, in the scriptures, the 40 days of fasting and praying that these three very important men entered into led to something. So Moses fasted and prayed in the wilderness on Mount Sinai. And at the end of that, he received the 10 Commandments, the basis of all Jewish law. That's what came to him. Elijah went out into the wilderness and he fasted and prayed for 40 days. And at the end of those 40 days, Elijah heard the voice of God. He became enlightened, perhaps. And then Jesus went into the wilderness for 40 days. It's there where he is tempted by Satan, which is up here, right? The Satan that's up here that says, aren't you hungry? Isn't this silly? No one will know. Have a pizza. Jesus goes into the desert for 40 days and he prays and fasts, and at the end of that is when he starts his ministry. This ministry that changed the entire world, regardless of what religious tradition you come from or what religious tradition you follow. This is a ministry that changed the entire world, and he did not begin it until he had fasted and prayed for 40 days. So when we look at the three men who modeled this for us and what their fasting and praying led to, then we can see that Lent, fasting and praying, is not an act of devotion alone. It is an act of preparation. It is consciously choosing to prepare ourselves for what waits at the end of this period of time. And for us, those Nicene Council folks figured out the best place to put it. Because for us, what waits at the end is resurrection. The preparation of ourselves through fasting and prayer leads to resurrection, leads to living a life that is animated from that spirit within us, the divine essence, who we really are. There's just one problem. That stone, right? That stone. I want you to picture with me, if you will, for just a few moments. I want you to picture deep down inside of you, there's a tomb. Now, inside and outside really don't matter in spirit. surface, depth, whatever. But we're going to go with this as a metaphor for just a moment. Inside of you is this tomb. And inside of that tomb is your Christ nature, your Buddha nature, your Krishna nature, your goddess, your I am. I don't care what you call it. Call it Bob. Inside that tomb is that Christ nature, who you really, really are. And outside of the tomb is all of the expression of you. This is your essence. This is your expression. And your expression is the way you show up in the world. The reason why we don't like it sometimes when we hear that we're all one is because we want to be different. Well, your expression is different. You're fine. Your expression is always going to be different. It's going to be unique. It's going to be how you express out in the world. But your essence, that is the part of us that is connected to the whole. That is the part of us that is one. Right? And that is who we truly are. So outside of this tomb is this expression. All of those things I mentioned in the meditation. Your name, your face, your personality, your sense of humor, your lack of a sense of humor, whichever way it may be, right? Your job, the work that you do in the world, everything. Your story. That's a big one for me. The story is not me. Letting go of the story. So out here is the expression, and in here is the essence. And the goal of awakening, the goal of resurrection, the goal of enlightenment is to have this come out and enliven everything we do. You remember those little, oh, I wish I had a picture of it. Do you remember those little lights in the 60s, I think, or the 70s? And they were all these little filament strands, and they had these little laser. You remember those, Sherry? You know what I'm talking about? All these filament strands, and then, what's that? Fiber optic. Okay, that too. Fiber optic, and it would make all, and the light, you turn on the light, and it would be light at the end of each one of those. That's what we're trying to go for here. We're trying to get that essence to come out and live through and animate and enliven every part of our expression until how we show up in the world and who we really are so not different that we can't tell where the line is anymore. Until this is how we show up. This is what guides and energizes everything we do. So we want to roll that stone away. We want to roll that stone away. And maybe even as I'm talking to you, you're thinking to yourself, what is it that stands between me and living as divine essence every day? What is it? Because you know. I don't know. You know. I gave up 2 things for Lent this year. I gave up a body thing and a mind thing. I gave up sugar, and let me tell you something, I totally suck at that. I really do. I have messed this up so badly. But the cool thing about Lent is that it doesn't let you off the hook. You don't mess up and then go, well, that's over, screw it. It says, no, 40 days is not up yet. Do it again tomorrow. Do it again tomorrow. Do it again tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. Let's start all over again. You're still in the energy of giving this up. Giving up sugar. I don't know if any of y'all have ever given up sugar, but it is like the single most impossible thing that Americans can do. Right? Because sugar is everywhere. I believe sugar is kind of in the oxygen that we breathe. It's everywhere. They put sugar in the water supply. But you can give it your best shot. And what I have found is that when I give up something in the body temple, that it clarifies my spiritual vision. It clarifies my spiritual vision. So it's an important practice. And if you don't know how important that practice can be, then talk to several of the people around here who really, really know. Talk to Becky Estorita and see what she says. The second thing that I gave up for Lent was I gave up all negative self-talk. Yeah? There you go. All negative self-talk. Believe it or not, that one has been easier. That one has been easier because you have to prepare for the preparation. And I've been preparing for that for several years. And I also had a really great tool at my disposal because Reverend D has given us that tool over the last several weeks. Let me tell you how much your life will change if every morning and every night you stand in your living room and out loud you say, I am here now. I connect to the one presence and one power and awaken the divine in me. I allow the energy of the divine to flow through my body. I am open to receive the wisdom of the universe. I ask to be loved, and I share this love with others, and I am at peace. I am beloved. Beloved, I am. It'll change your life. It can get rid of negative self-talk so fast and make your head spin, because your head's not involved in this at all anyway. It's all a heart thing. And I also was just thrilled when Denise showed us that we can do that without the words, because I go into that proverbial bathroom stall at work when things get a little conflicty. That's a word, I just made it up, I swear it is, I'm a professional. When things get a little conflicty at work, I can go in that bathroom stall without saying a word. It's been an amazing, amazing journey so far, and we're only halfway through. Here's the thing. Giving up what stands in the way of living our divine essence would be easy if there was only one stone. Click on that, Crystal. Thank you. But most of us have a pile of stones. I've had a pile, I can tell you that. And every now and then, the universe will blow some of those stones away for you. Now, before you get too excited about that, it usually doesn't feel good. I've had experiences in my life that have brought me to my knees. I mean, to my knees. I remember one time in particular. It was October of 1999. And I'd had an experience that had brought me to my knees. And on this particular sunny morning, I walked out on my porch. It's as if it was yesterday. You know those moments that are just like they were yesterday, and they were 18 years ago. I walked out on my porch, and it suddenly all came crashing down on me. And I literally, and I know how to use that word, I literally shook my fist at the sky, and I cursed God. I said words that I will not say from this stage, and I will say a lot of shit from this stage. I said words to God that if God was a sailor, God would be blushing. I mean, I let God have it. I couldn't take it anymore. And what I felt overwhelmingly deep inside of me in that instance was a sense of peace so real, so complete. And if I was Elijah and heard the voice of God, this was the voice of God that I believed I heard, it's okay. Just keep bringing it to me. Be angry. Just keep bringing it to me. And I was surrounded by a whole lot of people right then who didn't let me go live in the land of why, because what you want to do in those moments is live in the land of why. Right? And they were spiritually evolved enough to let me know that there are no answers that live in the land of why. So you just better come out of that land really quickly. So I didn't know at that moment the whys, but I do know this, that over the last 19 years, I have had so many occasions where I've got a student sitting across my desk from me, and they're telling me stories that are almost too much to take in. I've had students sit across from me and tell me that they just got diagnosed with a brain tumor. I've had a student tell me that his daughter was on a ventilator in pediatric ICU in Vanderbilt. I've had students tell me they've been kicked out of their house. I've had them tell me that they haven't eaten in 3 days, but I'll get that paper to you real soon, Professor Moore. I've had them tell me stories of abuse that I will not even violate their confidentiality in an anonymous way. I tell you. And what I have felt in those moments is a compassion that has welled up from such a deep place. I could not have created it in my outward expression. It welled up so deeply within me that I no longer was being compassionate or acting compassionate. I was just simply compassion. Screw the paper. Paper didn't matter in those moments. And I knew that the reason that I could do this, the only reason I could do this, was the universe had blasted some of those stones. And I gotta tell you, most of those stones had the same name, and it was pride. Eve probably had similar experiences. I'm not unique. We've all been brought to our knees. But somewhere in there, if we maintained the faith of a mustard seed, we find the grace of God. We find the lap of God. We're able to rest there and know who we really are. It's easier to roll the stones away yourself. Let me just put it to you that way. It's easier for you to figure out what those stones are and to make a conscious choice to set them aside and make a conscious choice to focus on the divine essence of who you are. Because in that space, you live from a place of spiritual fearlessness. And you live in a way that allows you to handle some of these things that bring you to your knees. We live a little bit more like this, as radiant beams of light. But you know what? Some of those only come out through prayer and fasting. We have to prepare to do that. We have to prepare to reach that. In the Message, which is, of course, Denise's favorite version of the scriptures. In the Message, when the disciples come to Jesus and they say, why couldn't we drive it out? Instead of saying, because, you didn't have enough faith, the Message says this, because you are not yet taking God seriously. Taking God seriously is about living from this place. A lot of us, we all have a spiritual practice. We're in church. You're engaging in it right now. But a lot of us make conscious decisions about a spiritual practice. We've all been here. I know we have, myself included. I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes a day. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes a day. Not a bad thing. But it's kind of like spiritual practice in the way that my mother made me practice the piano when I was 7 years old. Right? It was me and John Thompson's Book 1 for 30 minutes, by God, because we paid for that piano. You're going to learn how to play it. And I would sit there, doing all these scales and all these exercises, and my eye was watching the clock the whole time, and I knew exactly when 30 minutes was up, and I'd say, Mom, it's 30 minutes. Can I be done now? Yes. And I'd run outside, and I'd climb a tree, and I would forget the music. I'd forget the music. I was climbing a tree, right? Yeah. So spiritual practice versus living a resurrected life is like the difference between 30 minutes with John Thompson's Book 1 and being a musician. Right? And being a musician. Right? Hearing the music in your head all the time. It can drive you crazy after a while, can't it? Yes, just a little bit. Hearing the music in your head all the time. There's nothing wrong with the 30 minutes with John Thompson's Book 1, because it taught me to read music, and it taught me some theory, and it taught me some very important things. And I was a little 7-year-old, and I was a babe. I've been around this group of spiritual journeyers for a long time now. Nobody in here is 7 years old anymore. Nobody's a babe anymore. We're ready to move beyond giving a few minutes to our practice every day, to living our practice, to living as the resurrection, to living as the awakening, to living as the enlightened one. We're ready to step into that. I firmly believe that if you do a little bit of practice, that come April 1st, which is Easter Sunday, Reverend Dee will probably stand up here and midwife your resurrection for you. She'll say something that will help roll that last stone away. We are halfway through Lent right now. So don't worry that you missed the whole 40 days because you can run a half marathon to start with. And if the 40 feels magical to you somehow, do something twice a day. I don't know. Figure it out. Start with 20 days. Lent doesn't have to just end at Easter. Live in the place of Lent. Live in the place of denying and affirming. Live in the place of letting go and intentionally focusing. It was the road to enlightenment for the Buddha. It is the way that we show up as who we really are in this world. It is the way. How will you prepare yourself for resurrection? That is the question today.
grace of God. It was at hand. Now I can say, if you are discouraged, struggling just to make it through another, you've got to let it go. Let it all go. And this is what you've got to say. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit of my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I release and I let go. I let the Spirit run my life, and my heart is open wide. Yes, I'm only here for God. No more struggle, no more strife. With my faith I see the light. I am free in the Spirit. Yes, I'm only here for God. I am free in the Spirit, 'cause I'm only here for
Lord have mercy.
Yes.
I am taking off a hat and I am putting on a hat. And now it is time for us to engage in our sacred walk of abundance, which is the time that we are able to give back to our spiritual community. If you're here for the first time, then what we do is you come forward and you get one of these, which has today's affirmation on it, and then put any tithes, gifts, and offerings into the crystal bowl there. So if you'll take those gifts in your hands and say the offering affirmation with me. Divine love flowing through me blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And so it is. And so we open our hands and we open our hearts and we allow the energy of the divine to flow in our lives. And we know that all that we have given will come back to us, heaped up, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, for that's the law. And so it is. And so I ask that you remember this one thing while I walk back and get demiked. As you're singing, the way that we do this in unity is that you always put your thumbs to the left. You put this palm down, you put this palm like this when you're holding someone's hand. So know that you are holding the hand of the resurrected Christ, and so are they. Let's sing together to close this service.
I know, now there's like a total sense of dance.
Pardon me?
Which song it is?
Yes, it is.
Human Being.
No. No, I didn't see that. Oh, let me tell you an interesting evolution.
I'm almost.
Her singing phenomenon. Did a concert at Texas Indoor Theater. Okay. It's over by Opera.
Wait.
Turns out, my friend Billy Anderson was traveling Gospel Time, and he was the first phone call I made when I moved to Nashville 30 years ago. Yesterday, 30 years. Anyway, he's in charge of controls the team. Well, I had Stephanie asked me about what she wanted to see on that album. Well, and I told her about her leader, so they never connected.
Dude, we're
She never connected it. So I told her,
Wait, you only have music. Yeah, we can play Crazy 8.
that theater's available to me. They've got video, they've got tours, they've got full video, they've got full stage upstairs and all this stuff, and they've got the stage, they've got all the whole 9 yards seats. I think, I didn't think about the thing about that place is that was the place on the language and had one and he's not in charge of that. So I'm going to see, he started the Cowboy Church. Remember the Cowboy Church? Okay, well, when I moved here, I sang at the Cowboy Church for 3 years. Anyway, I did video, 2 music videos for him. We did a production. I acted in a production. It's called Police Department. Anyway, that place is where I want to do Blacklands, and it's going to be, it's about, I think, $1,500 for the entire day. And I've already got, I thought I had this. If we're able to do this, Dr. Katie, I spoke with her about it. I'm not sure if that's it. I would like to rehearse and do all of this thing and have it produced over going forward, and then take that through later this school, take it over to that, to the one-night performance and videotape it. And if that happens, I would like to do the sound. Dave is target. No, I haven't. Really? Really?
So do you need a...
Well, see, here's the thing. Thursday night is my only day off. So Thursday is perfect. So where is that club?
No, that's what I'm doing.
Charlotte? Okay. Five Bell. Charlotte Exit. Oh yes, okay. 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 Well, I'm going to find it, and on Thursday night, and he's doing the video. All right. Okay.
Nick, you're joining the choir, right?
It's a foregone.
Yeah.
That was quite a sin.